A few years ago, I was reading the AAW American Woodturner magazine. Okay. And I was reading an article, and it was by Mike Pease. And he was talking about doing wet sanding. And I had just bought a positive air respirator. Okay? I was doing some big ash bowls and dry ash. The sanding is horrific. You get it, you know, even though I'm running dust collector and stuff.
And walnut, look out.
Walnut, oak, actually all of it, you know, dry wood, you know. And what I end up finding is that by wet sanding, my abrasives last 10 times as long. The slurry that it creates fills pores, and it's unbelievably messy. Okay, so I use walnut oil as the liquid for the wet sanding. And believe me, walnut oil cures. I wear sweatpants and stuff, and I have some sweatpants that almost feel like leather now because I've been doing it so long, okay? So I want to mention one thing about abrasives. Jim Forbes turned me on to what's that guy's name? Vince's Wood Wonders. Vince's Wood Wonders. Okay, so
yeah.
Jim.
I buy from both of them. Depending.
Okay, so Jim turned me on to this foam abrasive from Vince's Wood Wonders. It's made by Unida, and they advertise that lasts 30 times longer than regular abrasives. And I've actually fallen absolutely in love with it. Now I use regular abrasives to do a lot of the initial sanding. But once I get, you know, once I really get going, almost every single thing I sand, I wet sand. And a lot of the stuff that I turn a lot of live edge, natural edge, and whatnot. And you can't really sand that with the lathe spinning, okay? Not out past where the bark is and stuff. So I do a lot of sand. Now, I use air to do my sanding. I use a right angle grinder because it's so much easier to maneuver than a drill. And if I use a drill, I use a cordless, okay? And so I've got a ton of this EcoSilk abrasives, and I actually when I buy it from Unida, it comes in 3x4 or 5-inch or 6-inch rounds. Well, I actually turned some hole saws into die cutters, and I make my own. So these were all cut with the, you know, with my hole saw thing.
You're using stuff that's as thick as what we're seeing there?
I have the 3/16, 1/4 inch, and then I have that stuff. And the thing is, with the thicker foam, it actually contours to the shapes and stuff. The thinner stuff is a little more firm, but I really, really like the 1/2 inch, okay? So, you know, I'm always looking for deals and whatnot, and I was looking at Unida, and they had a sale, so I bought a bunch. I have a lifetime supply of this stuff now. But they had a clearance thing, and so I bought a bunch of this too. So the clearance was 75% off. So these individual pads, it comes in three grits, and normally if you bought a box, it's like $32. There's 20 20 pieces. So it's $1 something a piece, but at 75% off, it comes out to be like 40 cents a piece. And I use this stuff for spindle. Okay, the grits are, the medium is 120 to 150. The fine is 220 to 240, and the very fine is 320 to 380. Okay, and medium fine is 150 to 180. And for me, for spindle turning, this is all I need. Okay, but I do wet sanding. So, you know, I made all the wig stands that I made. I used these, and that was it. Okay, even on the bowl type pieces, I actually didn't do any power sanding on those at all. So when I do sanding, 95% of the sand isn't done on a lathe because I shouldn't say that. It depends on what I'm doing, but I've been doing so many live edge pieces lately that I haven't done any sanding on the lathe. So I'm not going to do any turning here, but normally what I would do, you know, this was done a few weeks ago. It's ready to be finished. I threw some CA in here because there's some cracks and stuff. But I'd normally mount this up here, true up the bottom, and then blend it in, and then I do sanding. Now when I do sanding with the right angle grinder and with the foam stuff, it's very forgiving unless you have a crisp detail, but I have very little things I make with crisp details. When I'm using a drill or the die grinder, I make the sand abrasives contact the wood in the direction of the grain. Okay? And you have to be cautious, especially with the die grinder, of not being too aggressive because you know, with the foam stuff, it's very forgiving.
And you're using a basic circular drill bit, not a random oval.
I use both, but for like when I do my three-legged bowls, to get around, you know, take stuff down and whatnot, I normally use the rattling grinder to do the majority of the sanding. Then I'll go to the random orbital to do the finished sanding. Okay, and I have a pump table over there with a box on it that's actually a downdraft table. So where I'll get a chair. Now, normally my dust collector has a chute that comes down here with 4 offsprings. 1 for the table saw and then 3 for the lathes, okay? Because there's usually one there, and then this one. Lighting is critical, okay? If you don't have good lighting, and this lighting, a lot of wet sanding. I use when I'm doing, okay, so I started a Stuart Batty thing and he talked about using negatives scrapers and think of them as abrasives. And that was another light bulb that went off. And so when I do these things, I get my basic shape, then I use the negative scraper to remove tooling marks. Okay, and when he said that, thinking about abrasives, think of your negative scrapers as abrasives. These are my probably 2 most used negative scrapers. They're basically skews. But you can use them in either direction, just whatever side you're going. So
in seconds of the grinder.
Yeah, you just flip side. Okay, and so for the outside of the bowl, straight skew. For the inside of the bowls, a curved skew. Okay, and let me just pass this around. I don't think you'll find tooling marks on that piece. You might find some down by where the tenon is. Okay, but I spend extra time real fine touching with the neighboring scraper, okay? And until I can get them all out. Sometimes if they're getting too thin, then, you know, you have trouble getting them all out, but
Do you ever switch the orientation to shear scrape on it, or do you keep it always just flat?
almost always just flat. But I'm just barely touching.
There.
I mean, you can do that, but now you've got the added problem. If you're not careful, it'll flop back on you.
Okay, well, keep in mind that this is all green stuff. Okay,
You've been doing remarkable
I've been-
recording with that stuff.
I've been doing a lot of live. I did 2 pickup truck loads. I'm almost to the end, but I'm racing the clock because the wood I haven't get it done, and so I'm afraid I'm going to lose all the bark on what I have left. Okay, it's winter cut wood, and if I did it right away, but you know you can only do so much. I still kind of work. I believe it's Siberian elm. Claude thinks it's black locust, but I don't think so because I've redone some legs and it doesn't seem hard to turn. I'm having problems with it. Now, one thing with this Siberian elm is on that you feel the edge where the bark meets the wood. Tremendous amount of sanding to get it so you don't have an indentation. Okay.
You try soaking that with CA before you do that.
No, I haven't.
Try that. You'll get a uniform surface.
It's a very tiny head for the fin because it runs.
Well, let's put this. This dips down at least 30 thousandths,
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna fill that.
No. But
Okay.
If you had sealed it first,
Oh, it wouldn't have shrunk as much, probably.
it would protect it, and so you could get a uniform, smooth surface by just sealing all of that cambium layer or that bark, inside bark layer with CA glue, inside and out. When you're probably an eighth of an inch before that turn, you know, the next to the final turn, seal that. Keep that.
Well, I'll keep that in mind for next year.
Is that going to slow that down, or is it going to stop it totally? Or is that going to dry eventually?
I've found that I can get a beautiful surface finish. It darkens it a little,
Yeah.
but it gives you a nice finish from the wood surface all the way through the bark.
So here's one that's completed. The finish that's on there is my preferred sheen and whatnot. And that's basically a Maloof knockoff finish, thanks to Jim Forbes giving me the recipe, and I've changed the recipe to my approach. I don't use, so Maloof finish is 1/3 tung oil, 1/3 varnish, and 1/3 turpentine.
Yeah.
Okay, and I use General Wood Bowl finish as the varnish, and I use citrus solvent as the thinner. So it smells a little better. I just don't like turpentine. Butternut smells like turpentine, by the way, when you turn it. Okay.
Leave that after the walnut oil ending.
Yeah.
okay.
So the walnut saturates into it and so on and so forth. And in reality, with the negative scraping on dry pieces, let's say I'm doing a twice turnt bowl. I'll saturate it with some walnut oil, then do the negative scraping. And, you know, you go real nice and easy. You might get a minuscule amount of tear out, but it's easy to sand out. Okay, but I just, almost every single thing I do, I wet sand. Yeah. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of sanding, but...
You said you do most of your sanding off of the lathe.
Yeah, well, the thing on this, I would probably do the tenon. I do the tenon, you know, straighten up the bottom, and then do a little rework of the foot of the bowl, and then I'll do sanding on the lathe, but it's not spinning. Okay, it might do some spinning, but once you get to this point, sanding, spinning, I'm just not, so what'll end up happening is you'll actually get a high and low, because of the intermittent thing. Okay, now Don may have a different approach, but this is Ron's thing. And in reality, the vast majority, even big ass bowls, vast majority of it I do off of the lathe. Okay, or with the lathe not spinning, because if I've got some little tear out or something like that, and you got to be cautious with spalted wood when the wood is soft, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I don't actually do a lot of sanding on the lathe, spinning, because a lot of the wood that I would work with, many people might not work with it because they consider it junk. But I'm not at that point where I get picky.
I think in turning, the junk wood is our prize.
Well,
Get spalted stuff and
so the thing is, if you're sanding, if you've got a piece of spalted wood and you're sanding with it turning, I can guarantee power sanding, even hand sanding, I can guarantee that you're going to have dips. Okay, if anybody has a different opinion about that, please speak up. But I've had so many. Well, the soft wood. I can go and get a piece to show you something that was unbelievably punky, and so I didn't turn that. I didn't sand it on the lathe with it spinning. Okay, you really have to be careful. I do a lot of stuff to firm up punky wood. I use boiled linseed oil. I use wood hardener, CA glue. All depends. But if I see that I have a white rot area or something like that, you can't go sanding that with it spinning. It just you're just going to ruin your piece.
It cleans up pretty quickly with it not spinning, and a random orbital.
Yeah, and the thing is, and with the foam abrasive, it works out well for me.
What do you use for a random orbital tool?
Well, I have several. so this is from Woodturners Wonders. Okay, this is a pneumatic. Okay, the problem with pneumatic is you have to have a compressor, and you have to have a compressor that's got enough volume to do it. So this I think it uses 4.9 feet per minute. And I had a Craftsman compressor, 60 gallon, 220, 3.1 horse motor that generated 12.3 at 40 and 11.1 or something like that at 90. But it was loud. But I've since turned around and bought a California air compressor. Cost me 3 times as much as I paid for that Craftsman. No, that was $2,000. Paid $2,000 for.
Mine's very quiet. It won't run at all.
Okay, so after the last meeting, I downloaded the decimal thing from my phone, and when I was running my dust collector and the compressor, I was hitting about 76 decibels. Okay, so I'll flip my dust collector on just so you can get a gist of the noise that I deal with. There's my dust collector. Okay. Okay, so in the sanding I do, okay, my contact is with the direction of the grain. Okay.
Wet right now? Are you considering that wet?
No. I use the dry abrasive somewhat, but the vast majority of it is wet. So when I do the wet sanding, just absolutely saturate it. Okay, because walnut oil's one of my best. I love it. Okay, when I first started, I did the mineral oil, but I've learned. Okay, the mineral oil is not a finish. All it does is make the wood look pretty. So all it does. It does nothing for the wood.
Never dries.
Never dries, doesn't do anything.
Well, that's the difference. Mahoney puts a dryer in there.
No, he doesn't put a dryer. It's the process that he makes it that it does it. Even the stuff that you'd get at Whole Foods, if you left it out long enough, it will polymerize. Okay? Okay. All I'm doing is trying to get that step out. I'm not going to sand this whole thing. Now keep in mind, even when I'm wet sanding, I'm doing it right by, usually I'm over here and I got one of my things and I'm doing it right into the dust collector chute. And
That hasn't gummed up the works here at all.
well, it's still sucking.
Right. Dries before it gets very far.
Yeah, boy, the walnut oil takes a long time to dry. Okay. But the biggest key that I'm trying to say here is that even with the electric drill or a cordless drill or whatever, when the abrasives make contact with the wood, it's best is if you can have it so it follows the grain of the wood.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it'll sand a lot easier and a lot tougher to get rid of a lot easier to get rid of any scratch marks that leave to it.
Doing that whole bowl by your method, about how long would you spend on it?
Maybe an hour and a half,
Really?
2 hours maybe. I spend way more time sanding than I do turning. Now on these elm bowls, it goes up exponentially because of that thing that's happened with the wood. Okay, so I'm gonna go a little bit further here. Now I'm using 120 paper right now.
Ron, is that where you start? Is your progression starting at 120?
It depends on the situation. A lot of times with the twice turned bowls and the negative scraping, I can start at 240.
And so you don't, at 240, you're not really concerned about recontouring?
No, the contour is there. Okay, the thing is that sanding does not make up for lack of skill. Okay, bottom line, my skill set has progressed, and I do a lot of turning, a lot of bowls. Okay, I have a barrel over there with a whole bunch of these things in there that are all cord, and probably about 20 minutes a piece if I'm not doing the legs, to take it from the cord piece that's 3/4 of an inch thick. I set it up, do up a tenon because there's no tenon on one of the cord bowls, then do the outside, and then grab it, and then do my cuts on the inside with the negative scraping stuff. I do the negative scraping out here, and then now these are all just gonna go because they're wet, and a couple weeks I can sand them. I won't get to sanding them because I've got so many of them. So right now, because I have so much stock to move for that's where I'll use the regular abrasives when I have stock to move. So here I'm actually doing one thing. I cannot throw this back on the lathe and turn it. Okay, a once turned bowl distorts. With the live edge, natural edge bowls, nobody anywhere will notice distortion. Okay?
Yeah, especially once you sand that base flat.
Well, or turn it flat. Turn it flat. So with my stuff, I set it up. I'll re-true the tenon, and I'll semi-flatten the bottom and do a blend. Okay? And I'm just looking to make sure that my thing here versus what I get. Now, if I were to set this up, I'd go and make a real small tenon on this. Extremely small tenon, and virtually do the bottom, okay, except for I have a 1 inch, 1 1/8 chuck. And so I'd make a real small tenon because I'm not doing any turning really per se on this. Then I'll turn around and I use the chuck to hold it when I'm doing sanding, okay?
You don't use a vacuum chuck to hold it?
No. Let's put it this way. When I go to take off 10, because I've got good sized base on here, I've got this little live center that I made that I can get to a real small thing. So I can do, this is what, a 4-inch, 4.5-inch foot. Okay, so I'll keep that around that size, turn down to an inch, 1.25 tenon to hold it, and then I can do a little recess and do whatnot, and leave the 1 inch tenon there, turn it to hold it to do my sanding. Okay, then I'll put it back on. I got my center. I'll go onto a fine point, leave a little nub, knock that off, and then take this with the grain, and
So Ron, I was a little confused in the beginning where you said you were wet sanding.
I'm going to get there.
So what I was assuming was that you were wet sanding wet wood. You're wet sanding dry.
Dry wood. Okay, my wig stands here. Now I don't do spindle work, and I don't do real fine stuff. This is roasted red oak and ash. So red oak, and actually this is ash, this is ash. This is roasted. I actually have some kits if somebody wants to play with some of this stuff. Very dusty, very, very dusty. And this is just sanded out to the 320 or whatever it is. And everything was totally wet sanded. Okay.
Wet sanded wet, wet sanded dry.
The wood's dry, wet sanding to keep the abrasive clear. Now, a really important thing with the wet sanding and stuff is it fills up with stuff, and no. Because I'm using the EcoSilk, and I don't know what the heck this stuff's called, but.
Ron, you're showing us that you're holding the bowl in your hand.
Well, it would be.
The oil. Do you typically do that with the bowl mounted on the lathe?
Yeah. Okay. It's just I didn't go and put a tenon on this. I'm not going to get into that. So on the EcoSilk, it goes coarse, medium fine, fine, extra fine, super fine, and ultra fine. Okay, and when I do the leg bowls, I'll use a 1 inch disc, a 1 inch backer with the 3 inch, because it'll ride up along the side of the.
And that's a twist lock.
Yeah, this is Woodturners Wonders stuff. So I'll go 3 and 3, Bill.
I'm
Okay.
just curious as to why you did that.
Just
To get
it's just whatever I'm in the mood for. Now, where I use the negative scraper to get rid of tool marks, I've got. Let me throw some oil on here, and you'll see the tear out that there is. The infamous tear out.
stuff that shows up too late.
Well, the thing is, one thing, can you see it right here? So there's some here and some over here, and you're gonna get that, okay? I don't get overly worked on it because I just work a little more sanding there.
So your slurry is actually filling some of that tear out too?
Well, no, the slurry is just keeping the abrasive clean. When I'm talking about filling the grain, that would be like on walnut and oak and stuff. The pores.
Yeah.
The tear out is tear out, and this is gonna show up unless you get rid of it. So because of the tear out, I'm gonna go to a 80 grit. Okay. Huh?
The other skid.
Okay, so one thing that's important, you have to clean even the slurry stuff. A little plastic brush, and it cleans the. As with any sanding, you have to work with one grit. I'll wait for that. It'll take a minute.
Thank God.
You're watching television?
Okay, so this is an electric buffer, polisher, sander, whatever. On my downdraft table, I have a receiver for a 1-inch post. I also have something I can attach to it so I can set this at whatever height, but a lot of the sanding I do is done this way. Wait a second. Yeah, it's really quiet.
Wife asked.
There we go. And use the brush to
Back up.
That's straight rotary there. No, it's right.
No, it's a random orbital. Okay. So,
And it doesn't have a lot of foam on it, so it's a firmer backer, right?
well, I make, whatever. The thing is that I make different foam pads and so on and so forth.
Twist locks are available with either put it straight on the pad or there's a added interface.
And you can buy,
Let it run away. Pretty soon it's flying out.
the only thing is with the wet sanding. So I've bought some foam backing things on Amazon, and the walnut oil actually has an effect with the adhesive that they use for the foam things. I make some foam backers out of yoga mats. So basically, it's just a repeat of that, and you sit there for God knows forever, and you do the sanding. When I'm doing twice turned bowls, there isn't as much sanding because these are rough turn green, and then let them dry. Now you got all the fuzziness and everything to work on. By wet sanding with the walnut oil, you can see the any tear out. You can see tooling marks. And lighting is critical. So the lathe I won from the competition is usually set up in the cellar. I'll have this in there. I'll sit it on a chair, do my wet sanding because it's not kicking up dust, and just sit there for hours. Okay? You know, sanding is sanding. The biggest thing is when you're running a round sanding thing, just keep in mind the grain direction. Get the pads to contact in the grain direction, because if you go across the grain, you're gonna show your scratches. So like if you're doing flat work, you sand with the grain and use random orbital sanders. I don't know, you know, I was never a scraper woodworker. I built mission furniture, mission style and shaker style furniture, functional, no ornate anything. I look at my wood turning and my wood crafting in the same idea. I'm making stuff that's meant to be used. I have no intention of making gallery type things. Okay, that's just Ron Marcoux. Okay, so here's some Norway maple, and in reality, I still have a little bit of marks from the turning, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a fine bowl. I'm not going to the league. Okay, if I were going to the league, that would reject it. Okay.
What's your final grid on that?
On the Ecosilk, it's 700. Okay, and
Do you go to 700 on your bowls?
on the final stages, yes. When I do it after the Maloo finish, I rub it out with the two highest grits normally. Wet sand, the Maloo finish.
Oh, I see.
Okay, and
Kind of like polishing the finish.
yeah, kinda. So now I buff. Now the problem is with a lot of the stuff that I do to try to get the sheen, because shiny sells. I hate it. But women want shiny. Okay? And with a lot of the wood I work with, it's what I call aged. Aged wood is wood that's been around for a long time. Yeah. It's very difficult to get a really shiny oil finish on aged wood. It just really is. If you want to get really nice, shiny, oiled finish, fresh wood is important. Okay. So on this, I just wanted to bring this out because with the wet sanding, it shows stuff. I just didn't look close up on that. There's a couple little lines, but you know, it's.
Has that got Maloo finish on it now?
Yeah. That is what is the finish on that.
So the walnut oil doesn't interfere.
How long ago did you put that finish on that bowl?
Pulled it out.
Oh, a while ago, a month ago. Well, I was actually, that was buffed with some Kittery grit yesterday. I have a Beal buffing system and I have a buffing machine, and anything that has the top coat finish of the General Wood Bowl finish, buffing wheel stuff, I had very poor success of buffing a top coat finish. Because what ends up happening is I get aggressive, heats up, goes through the finish. So when I got this thing, it came with some buffing stuff. And I went and grabbed the lamb's wool pad. So this is just a supposed lamb's wool pad. I stuck that on here. I used Jim's Kittery grit, and now I could get a really nice sheen. Okay, and
What is the Kittery grit? What is that?
it's diatomaceous earth It's basically a buffing compound.
Buffing compound. It's a knockoff of,
Yorkshire grid and whatnot.
Yorkshire grit or axe.
So I did a little thing. I had a little bit of wax left over, which is beeswax and carnauba wax. I had some walnut oil and the diatomaceous earth, and I stuck it in, it melted all together, and now I got something I'm gonna try. But I do not use the Kittery grid or any wax. Matter of fact, I don't use any wax till I'm absolutely positive that I'm not gonna be reapplying anything. Okay. But now where I found that buffing approach thing with the wool pads, I'm excited, okay, because I absolutely dread putting a top coat on. But honestly, when women pick up things, they want the shine. They want the shine. Even though if it's going to be used, it's not going to stay shiny. Okay, it just is not going to stay shiny.
Because my system, they get it shiny, but after they've washed it a couple of times, you gotta puff pretty hard to get any shine back.
Yeah, and so the thing is that for my spindle work, this is what I use mainly. I use everything, but I really like this stuff. 320 with spindle turning for me, unless it's like I make ball stoppers and pens, then I'll end up going up to the 700. The Ecosilk ultra fine. But sanding is sanding. For me, it's a necessary evil. I hate it with I have to kind of get in the mindset. I probably have 100 of these things here to sand. Okay, and I'm not gonna do them all. I'll be doing these for years.
You'd rather go to the big house than sand all of those.
Well, the thing is that as I sell them, then I'll do a few more, but you have to offer them to sell them though. So a bunch of the stuff will end up at Sunapee. Okay, so with the wet sanding, plastic brush to clean. Even when I'm using these, I have and I'll set up, and on this stuff they say it's washable and stuff. Well, I'm not washing anything, but I'll just get the slurry and stuff off here, and it actually lasts quite a while. So I'm a firm believer in the foam abrasive. Okay, and I don't know if the Ecosilk lasts 30 times longer than regular abrasives, but for me, I use it a long time. Okay, I have a little thing here of cut off pieces, and there's 7 grits, so there's 1, 2, 3. One of them's missing, but whatever. Okay, this has 2-inch and 3-inch on it, and that's about all I've got. Sanding is sanding. You just gotta go and go and go. The best finish you can get prior to sanding is gonna simplify life, and for me, the negative rake scraping is key to simplify my sanding.
Now, in your negative rake scraper, what grit of wheel are you using to create the burr?
Whatever one I pick, it does. Let's put it this way: with the curved negative rake scraper that I have here, this is a D-way. This is a D-way skew.
You bought that?
I bought that. I've got like 5 D-way tools now. Now that my
Straight steel. Why didn't you make it?
now that my skill set has has improved a great deal. I've actually bought tools. The only ones I've bought are from D-Way Tools. Matter of fact, I just got this one. I just got this one, this bad boy. Whoops. Yeah. This is his 3/4 inch, and I'll tell you, it's a monster.
That's also D-Way?
Yeah. So as far as the D-Way tools have such a nice polish inside, I'll tell you, I think that's what the polish inside. My homemade tools, they have no polish. You know.
The reason I ask you about your grit, you got two CBM wheels over there, right? What are your two?
There's 4 over here too. Well, actually, there's 2 diamond wheels. So this is a diamond wheel. This is a diamond wheel. The rest are CBNs. Now, the reason I had diamond wheels, I got them real cheap, and I bought them because years ago I was playing with a lot of carbide with my hollowing and my vesseling things and coring and. You know.
So what do you primarily use to sharpen it?
Well, if I'm doing my traditional bowl gouges, I use this. This is a, I forget what it is. It's a very worn down 180 or something like that. It's
worn down. It just.
Well, I did a lot. This CBN, I did carbide on this.
What's the other wheel on that grinder?
This is a 60 up here.
60. Okay.
And these others, I believe, are 180s, and these are 180s.
So your finest is a 180.
My finest is, yeah, maybe. I know this one's 60. The rest, I don't know. I don't care.
That's roughing.
All
right. Well, I care. So what I was trying to lead into is I've been using my 600 on my gouges for the sharp edge, and I'm using the 180 on for scrapers for creating the burr on the negative grit scrapers. And I'm going to start experimenting because with that negative grit scraper, you can take off fine shavings, which is still going to leave some tool marks. Or you can get it down to where it's really doing what you're talking about, which is sanding. And I'm thinking if I set my burr with the 600 instead of the 180, I'm going to get a finer burr and a very light touch, and I'll just get sanding dust.
Okay, so the D-Way tool, this M42 steel, I believe that's what he's using. I actually don't get a burr. Okay, it just doesn't develop a burr. Okay, maybe it's the wheel that I'm using it on. The thing is, the wheel's there. I got this set for this thing, and I just use it.
You can do that.
You could take any random orbital sander. Woodturners Wonders sells little adapters. So I have a Porter cable. 5-inch. This is a regular 5-inch random orbital sander, and I got an adapter that it's 5/16 24 in your grinders. That one's the same thing, and Woodturners Wonders sells this adapter that has a 5/16 24 male thread and a 1/4 inch male thread on the other side, and then the twist lock things screw right on there. So if I'm going to go do some flat stock, I can turn around, take this off, put the regular 5-inch pad on here, and go. The thing with these things is that they're heavy. I would love to find, and I did find one, and I almost bit the bullet on it, but United sells an electric one that's about this size.
In a random.
3-inch random orbital. They have a vacuum one and a non-vacuum one. And they had a 20% off sale. $470. So, and that was 20% off. And so I haven't had any sales since I got money from February. So I didn't spend the money. Okay, but that'll probably be something that I will get once I, you know, have a good month. You know. What's this?
Hope Gene's not listening.
Well, actually, I'm very fortunate to say that my woodworking, the house money and the woodworking stuff is totally separated, and so everything I've done in the last 3 years has been covered by woodworking. The wall oven I just purchased for roasting wood, you know, came from the woodworking. You know, if you know, my cousins are in woodcrafting, wooden bowls and more, well, it's not my wooden bowls that make me money. Okay, believe me. You know, so that's about it. I'm not sure who wants to come up next, but
Just a second. Tell us about your curing of the walnut oil. You made a
okay. So
curing.
I've done a bunch of experimenting. There's a upright freezer over there, and I actually have some lights in there, and I have a UV light, and I actually, because Mike Mahoney says that UV light cures the walnut oil. So I went on Amazon, I bought a couple of UV lights, and I did a little experiment. And, you know, when they tell you that you can take finish, put it on glass, and a lot of times you can tell what type of finish is by how it cures on the glass. Well, I kind of did that with the walnut oil with the UV light, and it took about a week and a half, but it was curing. It wasn't firm hard yet, but it was actually curing. It was crinkling up and stuff. But heat helps, okay? But if you can get your pieces to be out in the sun, the UV lights from the sun are probably the best thing you get to cure your walnut oil. The biggest thing is that you can use it, apply it, and use the damn thing right away.
I'd been listening to it just sit for about 2 weeks. But then I was discovering after I'd get it buffed out, I'd take it upstairs. If it was a tablecloth, it was apt to have a little oily ring, even though it didn't feel oily. And so I picked up a UV grow light and that let them bask in that, but they're still taking a while.
Okay, let's put it this way.
Typically put the oil on until it quits absorbing. So if I got a piece of maple, quite often one coat, that's it. It won't take anything. I had a piece of Norfolk Island pine that came out of that box from Alcoa, and that thing was just light as a feather. I started putting walnut oil. Took about half a bottle. It now weighs as much as a piece of oak. I don't know how long that puppy's going to take to.
Okay, so with what Rick's talking about, that goes to something I mentioned before about aged wood. Okay, so for the longest time, people would say, Ron, you want some wood? Yeah, it's like a savings account. Well, that's bullshit. Okay, the bottom line is, and Donna Bainfield responded to a post on the forum years ago, and it's ever so true. Let's say you get wood, use it as soon as you can. You're going to get the best results the faster, fresher the wood is. Okay? So I have walnut, cherry, ash, maple in my little closet out there that's been there for years. That wood is very, very thirsty when I get around to using it. Okay, so just you know, the aged wood, as I say, is definitely much tougher to get Claude's finish on. I have to admit that I haven't quite gotten all the way there, but I probably burned about 20 or 30 bowls that I'd had roughed out just because I'm looking at them and saying, it's not going to be worth it. Not going to be worth it. So with the wet sanding, the biggest thing is get a plastic brush to get the slurry stuff off the paper.
The crepe eraser would not work?
It will, but I'm just finding that the wire brush is a little easier. a little easier. You know, I have a whole bunch of the, you know, I've got a whole bunch of these. Okay, and I use them.
Scrape on the dry, and it works quite well.
But this is
Coarser grit, not too good at
this is a simple cleaning brush, and I just take it and the right angle grinder or the random orbital or even my electric one. Okay, the thing with random orbitals, you can't run them free running. Okay, it's just not good. They should be in contact when you turn them on and turn them off. Okay, especially the electric one. I've torn the foam. I've torn these things apart. You know, I buy the.
Foam pad on the paddle, and that way I got to push a little harder. And
Okay.
I don't get the runaway speed as easily.
So actually, I don't have it on this, but I've got some foam in here to help feather this. Okay, because this will take a lot of stock off, and it'll ruin your piece just as quickly. Okay, so if you're going to use this, and I like this because it's a lot smaller and easier to maneuver than a hand drill, but you have to be careful. Okay, you can't go wild. Okay.
Will a 3-inch give you more control over that 2-inch as far as getting a tear out and taking the top break?
The 3-inch, you'll end up with more contact.
It's more a function of the diameter of the bowl. I use the 2 a lot because I can get.
Depending on where you're saying. So like on the outside of a bowl, a lot of times I use the full 3-inch. But on the inside, I'll go to a smaller size. So, you know, it's like the scallop sandpaper.
I'm just going to ask you about the scallop paper.
Okay, well, when you use the foam abrasive, you know, my 3-legged bowls, if it weren't for the foam abrasives, it'd be impossible to get a nice finish around the legs, around the feet. Okay, and Jim Forbes, my mentor, has turned me on to so many damn things that, you know.
I find that I don't have a compressor that could handle a hair grinder, so I use an electric sander, and I use the Milwaukee 55-degree angled sander rather than a.
Mine just died.
Yeah, well, you can get a cheap alternate at Home Depot at
Harbor Freight.
Harbor
Harbor
Freight
Freight.
for
$50.
The last time,
$50.
the last time I bought a drill at Harbor Freight was
Well,
for sanding. It was only $15. It lasted about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
I threw it into the garbage.
Like a
I didn't even
second, what's
bother
not to
bringing it
like?
back. I just never went back
Hey,
to
it's
Harbor Freight.
well, I've got a lot of Harbor Freight stuff, and I you know,
Never been lucky with
you
it.
know.
I've gone through 2 over the years. I've gone through, I think 3 of the Milwaukees. I had to replace a switch on the valve, but they're pretty substantial.
Okay, one thing with abrasives, it's best if you go up through the line. So I don't know if you saw I've got a bunch of these for different pads, different size pads, and it goes 60, 80, 120, 180, 240, 320, 400, 600, 800 in this. Okay? Don't skip more than 1 grit. Okay? Ideally, go through the whole thing. Okay? Let's put it this way, you don't want to go more than a 50% up. I'm just going by something I read in the AAW thing.
I think it's important to remember the concept of sanding. Sanding doesn't replace scratches, except with scratches. Sanding is a function of scratches that are
Smaller than the ones before.
smaller than the previous scratches. And so if you're always thinking that you want to get rid of a scratch, you got to get rid of it with a scratch. And then
Small scratch.
a series of smaller
Once you're
scratches.
done with the coarsest grit that you need for the circumstance, the subsequent grits all go pretty fast.
Yeah.
Except that you better look because the later grit may have revealed something you didn't see before. But
And you can't
so
get
going
rid
on
of it
up
with
to
that
3,
small
4,
grit.
500,
back.
those last few are
You gotta
2
go back.
seconds per bowl.
So you can use anything. You could use anything you want for your liquid medium in the wet sanding. I use the walnut oil because it's the type of a finish that I'm going to apply anyway. I've used boiled linseed oil. The problem with boiled linseed oil is that the next day that abrasive is useless. It's cured.
Yes.
Okay, you can use mineral oil. You can use water. Okay, I wouldn't recommend it, but technically you could use water. You know, that's about.
Orange solvent works.
Yep. So you know, that's about as much as I got.
Trying to remove the grit from the previous one, cleaning it off, so in case
Oh,
there's
yeah,
any.
Well, let's you
Sand it off.
You wipe it off. You wipe it off. Okay. You know, maybe someday I'll get real fussy and make nice stuff like Claude, but
Walnut oil, do you have to worry about the spontaneous combustion at all on the rags? Since it's curing,
let's
it
put
would
it this
fit
way.
you.
Let's put it this way. It's not like boiled linseed oil.
Yeah, it's not
Boiled
like
linseed oil will dry in a day, so a bunch of those rags will absolutely spontaneous. Watco Danish oil will absolutely positively spontaneous. I know this from a fact
Really? You've had it happen.
right here. The walnut oil, it takes a really long time to cure. I still don't throw a whole bunch in a barrel. I have a metal pail with a metal cover that if I'm doing oiling, I don't care what kind of oiling, they go in there and then they either go in the wood stove or they go to the dump.
I think everybody knows me, but I'm Don Lowe. So this is going to be about dry sanding, not wet sanding. But I will echo a lot of the things that Ron said. The better surface that you get from your turning tools, the easier your sanding is. I started sanding, of course, when I started turning. When I started turning, I wasn't a good turner, so I had to become a better sander. And you know, a lot of the stuff that I've learned is come from that, trying to overcome my inferior turning skills. But anyways, dry sanding, of course, is very different than the wet sanding. I brought a couple different sanders with me today. So both are electric. This is my random orbital. This one came from Griot's Garage, it's actually a car polisher. But I like it because it has an 8mm orbit. And so it swings around a lot more than normal random orbital sanders for wood finishing. I ended up going to electric on these because just have a small air compressor and I was just tired of listening to the thing run all the time. So I went to these electric ones. Certainly this is a lot bigger. The pneumatic ones that Ron showed you are a lot smaller, a little bit more manageable, but you still have to deal with your compressor. So this is a piece I turned yesterday. It's a piece of pin cherry. It has some spalting on it, but you can see, you know, all of the turning marks, of course, are radial. And so when I do the sanding, I try to present this the round wheel so that it's going across the radial lines to knock down the radial lines. And so other than that, we'll just start. I'm not going to do a lot of sanding. All right, so a couple things. I use a lot of these sanding pads. I get these from Woodturners Wonders. I like this wavy edge, and you'll see why in a minute. So the wood is spinning this way, and I want the wood to come into this pad from the center out, because if you go the other way, you run the risk of really scratching it. So you'll see this is a 180 grit pad. The wheel's spinning like this, and I don't know how well it shows up on the camera, but I'm going like this, so that the wood is entering from the center of the pad out.
So if the back was running, that cloud disappears very nicely.
Yeah, we won't run the I mean, that dust collector is pretty loud. And so you can see this is 180 grit. We've already taken off a good amount of it. The other thing that I found, obviously, is the end grit is a lot harder to sand, or the end grain rather, is a lot harder to sand than the side grain. And so you'll have marks on the end grain typically. So just sometimes also the random orbital is a good way to go. I find that normally I use this after I'm past 240 grit. And so I also use the random orbital sometimes when I'm And so again, the same general rule applies. Keep it tilted so that the wood is entering the pad from the inside out. And you see pretty much all the tool marks are out of that now. Now for the outside, I will generally like to go in reverse. But if you don't have reverse, just come at it from the bottom. So anyways, for the steps that I usually go through, I'll start with 180, and I usually start with this yellow pad. It's a little bit firmer, and that does a good job of knocking out the tool lines or whatever. So again, I don't know how well the camera shows it, but the rotation of the wheel is going across the tool mark, the radial lines of the tool marks. And we try to get those knocked down first. So, you know, at the 120, 180 grit range, you're basically taking out tool marks. And you can see the swirls from the sanding paper where the tool marks are pretty much gone. Same thing on the inside. We still got some tool marks. We'll try to get those out. Now, one thing, when you're in the working in the center of the bowl, you get a lot more passes of the wood past the wheel, and so you run the risk, if you spend too much time in the center of the bowl, you'll end up dishing it out a little bit, which obviously you don't want to do. And so this is, again, with the end grain, there's still a little bit of a tool mark there, and so sometimes I will spend a little time on the end grain, getting out the last of those tool marks. So anyway, we sanded the end grain by, did a little local sanding on the end grain. And so I just give it another pass or two. And then I do like to reverse direction during the sanding because your wood fibers tend to get laid down in one direction, and so your reverse direction you can pick those up and make it a little bit better surface finish. So again, we're going the opposite direction, but the wood is still coming from the bottom of the wheel. And so one of the things that I find, and I won't do it today, but I have an air chuck, obviously, and between grits, blow the dust out or blow the grit off the pads, and then you're not regrinding old sawdust.
Tom, do you ever find that the wood just takes hold of these swirl marks and you can't get them out?
I guess I haven't really noticed that it's a problem for me. One pretty good tool mark in that end grain. The biggest problem I find is the tool marks in the end grain. The end grain sands harder, and so you'll see me focusing on these tool marks in the end grain. And then after the tool marks in the end grain are out, again, we just take another pass to kind of homogenize everything. And then we'll go to the next grain. Yeah, make it all consistent. Now the other thing I will tell you is I will normally switch directions so that my wheel is coming off the edge, so I don't round that edge in. And so that was 240. I normally don't go past 320. I normally don't go past 320 or 400. I'm not going to go any further with this for that very reason. But I mean, in general, that's the process that I go through. And so, I mean, it's for me, it's very simple. This dry sanding, yes, it's dusty, but that's why you have dust collectors. And then you have the liberty of putting anything you want for a finish on it.
So what do you specifically use to collect the dust? Is it a similar situation you've got here?
Yeah, I've got a flexible hose and an arm, and I have a scoop here that I can adjust if I get it as close to the bowl as I can.
Are you wearing a full? We're all amongst friends. Are you wearing a full helmet when you're doing this? Face shield or?
It depends on the wood. I have one of these positive pressure helmets similar to that,
Yeah.
and black walnut irritates me. So cocobolo irritates me. There's a few other woods that irritate me. I'll wear that when I'm doing those things. And it also depends on how dry it is. If it's not too dry, then it's not a problem. But
I find that dry cocobolo irritates my wallet.
so but to answer your question, it depends. I have one. I use it for certain things. If the wood isn't too dry, and usually the dust collector system will keep it away from me.
Right.
I also have an overhead, one of those room air filter things.
Very close.
And so I have that set up. It's actually, the intake of it is right here, and I have I made a scoop on the back of it so that circulates around me and takes the dust. Whatever the dust collector doesn't get goes up past me, hopefully. And so everybody's different. I mean, the wet sanding, that's It works for on, obviously, if that's where you want to go and you're sensitive to the sanding dust. Again, I do all dry sanding, so I'm not limited to the type of finish that I put on it. And depends on the wood. I like bush oil on cherry and black walnut. I like water locks on that vase over there. Has 3 coats of water locks on it. I've also used some of Mahoney's oil, Odie's oil, Odie's dark I use. It depends on the wood, depends on what I'm trying to make it look like.
Does anybody use friction finish?
I was using it for a while, and I read an article, and I believe it to be true after some experience, is that the friction polish is sensitive to skin oils. And so if it's something that's going to be handled, that friction polish will just get obliterated.
That doesn't hold up, no.
Got it.
Even if it's not handled. I have Christmas ornaments that I used friction polish on 20 years ago. When they come out and they only come out at Christmas, so it's not like,
Yeah.
and they're dull.
Yeah, it's cool when you first put it on. When I first started out, I was using it, it's like, oh, this is awesome. And then after 6 months or a year, whatever, yeah, it's not so good.
I think Jim Forbes was saying, what do you do for finish? How do you get it so shiny, so smooth, right? So we've been talking about sanding. So when you sand something, I'm just going to kind of magnify what sanding marks look like. So this might be, 80 grit. So when the light comes in and hits that, it bounces back, bounces around, and you don't get a reflection. You don't get a shine. So the smaller the grits, the less the light gets trapped in these little grooves, magnified. So you don't get a shine. So the smoother you can get the sanding, the more reflection you're going to get, the more shine you're going to have. So sanding and getting it smooth is really the key to getting something shiny. You get a reflection. It doesn't trap the light. So how do I get them smooth? That's what we do. So I'm going to talk about water locks because that's what I use. That's all I use. But there are hundreds and hundreds of different types of finishes. And I just bookmarked a couple. There's Odie's, this is Woodcraft, and Osmo. They've come up with, 25, 30 different finishes. So,
The shelf life of 3 days.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't used any of these finishes, but, Ron's a good one to experiment. So maybe we ought to get him to do something. But there's a lot of different finishes you can get. And so just because I'm using water locks, that doesn't mean that's the only finish.
Why is it the only one we use?
Well, I've been a woodworker for a long time, and I always struggled with finishes. Even though I could do okay, but okay wasn't really good enough. So when you find something that works for you, you kind of stick with it. So you're going to find something that works for you, and you'll swear by that and stick to it because, hey, it works for you. So that's kind of how I ended up with water locks. I was getting the finish I wanted, and I got used to using it. So that's kind of what I stick with because I'm not smart enough to learn something new. Now on water locks, they make several different finishes. So I'm using Water Locks Original, and I like to start with the Water Lock Sealer. It's the brown can, and it's a satin. And they make a green can, which is the gloss. So I'll start with the satin, with the sealer, and then top coat with the gloss. Why am I doing that? Well, the sealer is what it is. It's a sealer. So if I put 2 coats of sealer on a piece of wood, the finish is gonna build up a lot quicker. So I'm finding that I use less material with a quicker buildup if I use the sealer first. You could use just the water lock gloss, and I've done that, but it doesn't build up quite as fast. And Water Locks makes a low VOC finish, So probably specifically designed for California because of the regulations that are out there. And I can't remember which is which. You can put, if you put the low VOC first, you can top it off with the original or vice versa. I don't remember. But there was some adhesion problems with mixing the two, and I can't remember which order it was in. So if you're buying the low VOC stuff, you'll want to check on that. So I'm sticking with the original sealer and the gloss, original. I've used some of the, I had some of the low VOC stuff in it. They say it's the same, but it's a different recipe, but the same. Not really the same. So that's what I'm using, Waterlocks. So I'm here to talk about Waterlocks, but there's so many other finishes. Woodcraft, they got so many different ones. So you're going to find something that works for you, and that's what you're going to use, probably. Oh, there's some more Odie's, some of that butcher block conditioner. I would highly recommend that. So that on that. You know, Waterlocks is a film finish. A film finish, much like, I'm sorry?
General wood bowl finish.
Well, I don't use Waterlocks on a salad bowl that I'm going to be cutting on. I wouldn't use Waterlocks on a cutting board. Let me put it that way. On a cutting board, you're going to be using a knife and you're going to be slicing stuff. And a film finish, I don't care what kind of film finish it is, it's not going to hold up. You'll chop.
There's two broad kinds. You've got oil finishes and film finishes.
Right.
All kinds of each.
Right. There's hundreds of different
And
ones.
to wash it, scrape it, mess with it. The oil finish is easily repairable. It's not going to have the same sheen and so on, as opposed to the film finish, which you can get a whole lot better sheen control, but harder to repair. So it just depends on what the piece is going to be used for.
Exactly. So I sell a lot of salad bowls, but I tell my customers that, a bowl, well, even a bowl this size, you're probably not going to eat out of. You're going to chop up your salad and stick it in a bowl like this that you're going to serve out of. So I tell my customers, this Waterlocks, this is a film finish. Well, I don't actually tell them it's a film finish because they won't know what I'm talking about. But, if you damage it, it's hard to repair. So use wood utensils. It's made for serving out of, not eating out of. And I think the Waterlocks will last for 100 years if you take care of it. So you don't damage it with metal utensils. It'll last a really long time. A couple here I have for show and tell. This is one of them. What I did with this one, I think I got 4 coats of Waterlocks. Typically 4 coats. I'll demonstrate this in a second.
Use the primer coat.
Yeah, I'll demonstrate that in a second. But this one went through that process. How do I start back? So, Triple E, I've got some buffing compound here that Mike DiMaggio is making, and it's the earth stuff, what do you call it?
Diatomaceous earth.
That stuff, and it's a couple of combinations of wax. I think he's got beeswax and canuba wax and the earth stuff, I think is what it is. And you can change up the mixture to suit different finishes. So I used some of this on this bowl, pre-finish. So this is raw wood. This got no finish on it, nor does that one. And I used that on here and then coated it with a Waterlocks. Would it stick? Would it stick? I don't know. This one stuck. So experimenting a little bit. And what am I trying to do?
That first plus 4 coats of the various Waterlocks.
Correct. So I'm experimenting a little bit to kind of speed up the process. If you've done a Beal buff before, you know that takes, I could spend 20 minutes on a bowl, right? Doing a Beal buff. Does everybody here know what a Beal buff is?
No, I do not know.
Oh, okay. Well, let me start over. So a Beal buff, it's a buffing system. It's all it is. So those are the wheels, the buffing wheels I use. So it's a buffing compound, 2 buffing compounds. So it's a red buffing compound, a white buffing compound, and a canuba wax. And they each have their own wheel. You start with the red buffing compound.
Rotten stone.
So yeah, so I have, and I was going to demonstrate this, but I won't. I would put all my 4 coats on. I sand between coats with steel wool. And then 4/0 steel wool. Because of short of time, I am not going to do that, but I was going to actually sand one. So
Do you use the wheel or just the balls when you're doing your bucket?
well, I use the ball, and it's definitely not a beginner's tool because it'll pull a bowl right out of your hand.
You're gonna see the 6 inches.
Especially when you're hitting a hard edge.
Yeah.
So typically when I'm sanding the bottom, I'll run it up and down on one side and then flip it over and do with the grain, do the other end, not catch. If you catch an edge, it wants to pull it out of your hands. So I'll do this half, flip it, the grain going back the other way and do the other half on all 3 wheels.
And how fast are you spinning the wheels at?
Oh, I'm going pretty fast, up 1,000 maybe, 1,200. So these wheels are spinning pretty fast. Yeah, I've got some smaller wheels here. You could put in a Jacob's chuck and spin those, and then again, all 4 of them.
In an air tool? You're basically in an air tool doing this?
No, I'm on the lathe.
On the lathe, okay.
So these Bill,
An extender that comes out of your wheel.
well, the Bill Buff comes with the 3 waxes and this that fits into it's a Morse taper. And
Make an extender for that, so it comes out about twice as far.
yeah, and these screw in here and one at a time. So I'll line up a dozen bowls. So and I'll get them on a table, if you will, and I'll go through and do a dozen rather than changing the wheels. Sometimes it's a little monotonous. Sometimes you forget where you're at. So I'll buff one out with a red. And then I'll flip them all over as they get buffed out. So I remember I did that one already. Yeah. I'm up to this one. And then I'll start over. I'll flip them all back over and then do the white, which is, so they're color coded. The white's the white buffing compound.
And you're doing that after the water locks.
Yeah, that's the last step.
Okay.
How long after you put your final coat of water locks on do you buff them?
That's a great question. I like to send them a couple of weeks. Let them off gas for a couple of weeks. You don't want to buff it out when it's still off gassing. It's soft, it's green. So I will, and I think this is a bowl that's got it's got a little defect on it, but this got three coats of finish on it. So I will go through with my steel wool in between each coat, and I will just maybe go with the grain. This is 4/0 steel wool. And I'm gonna buff this out before I go to the Beal. So I do the same between coats, and I include doing this just before going to the buffing. Why? Well, I want to make sure I get all the little nibs and nubs off it. Who here was at that safety thing we had last meeting? We talked about air particles floating in the air, right? We talked about air, particles that are smaller than a asbestos fiber that are floating in the air. They're still here today, right now. You can't get rid of them. They're always in the air. You walk by something. So your shop or wherever you're finishing is contaminated no matter what you do. You're going to get some of that dust in your finish. Waterlocks does set up pretty fast. So it doesn't, so it doesn't pick up a lot of that dirty air that's floating around. So I'll go through and really lightly on the final coat, hit that rim. I don't want to cut the edges. So I want to keep my pad kind of flat when I'm doing the edges. So I'm not cutting the finish off an edge, and I'll go through and do the whole thing.
After you do that, can you use anything to pick up any
Great question. Great question. Thank you for asking that. And I don't use the tack cloth, but you could. So I'll use a rag. What is this called?
Microfiber.
Microfiber. And yes, I have not done this before, and start to put the final coat on between coats, and I'll look at my rag and there'll be still wool all over my rag. I'm like, oh, that can't be good. You hear about these food recalls that got metal in the food. I'm like, I'm putting metal in the finish. How good is that? So I will either tack rag them, or I'll take this rag and I'll just kind of swish it away, kind of thing. And you know, with this dry weather, it's you get that static, it just sticks to the bowl and you can't get rid of it. So I'll just kind of wipe and clean to make sure that I'm good. And that usually gets most of it off.
Have you tried a Merlon pad instead of steel wool?
No, I haven't. I'm not sure what that is.
Merlon is
Scotch.
it's like a Scotch Brite pad, but I'll use a 1500 grit because I did what you're saying. I put finish on, I'm going, oh crap, I have steel wool. Because I didn't wipe it enough.
Right.
Merlon doesn't break down like steel wool.
So it's another form of steel wool. It's not steel wool.
Steel wool, yeah.
So this bowl, and the finish isn't great yet. What I'm experimenting with is paste again, the sanding paste, or buffing paste. I really would rather call it that. But again, I did this one and did this yesterday. And I vacuum chucked this bowl and used this paste on it without any steel wool prior to doing the paste. And I'm not very happy. If you run your hands across this, that is not a finished bowl. It feels like I got sandpaper going around this thing. So not really happy.
It's just the page.
That's just the paste off the finished bowl.
Okay. So it hasn't been to the Beal yet.
No, I skipped the Beal thinking, okay, if I buff these with this compound, can I skip an hour of Beal work? Not an hour, but 20 minutes of Beal work.
So you're gonna use the steel wool on this and start over, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna start over. That would not be acceptable. If I was during a turner, I would say you gotta work on your finish.
Why wouldn't you steel wool that and then Beal it?
You could. I'm just saying I didn't on this one.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I was experimenting with Mike's compound to see how I might use it. Not sold on this yet.
Sorry, you didn't try it.
Yeah.
Same compound you use, you said you use that before you do any finishes also.
I did experiment on that one bowl, yes, but it's probably not a good idea. Some finishes won't stick to that stuff. So on this one, it was after, there was at the final step. It wasn't before the finish, it was after the finish. And the finish had cured for at least a couple of weeks. If you don't have a Beal, you can do that by hand with some rags. You could use something you buy out of hard. The Beal thing is really just about compound. You can buy buffing compound out of any magazine. You don't have to start with a Beal buff. It's just called that because that's what they coined.
Common brand, yeah.
But you can buy buffing compound almost anywhere as long in the wax. So the Canuba is probably the hardest natural wax known to mankind, Canuba. It is really hard.
Lasts a long time.
Lasts a long time, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm using the ball on inside and out, and you have to, you have to remember where you are. You're gonna make a full circle, so the ball only catches this much of your ball. So you go all the way around, and the ball's spinning the opposite way that I'm turning. So I'm going against the grain, right? It's turning this way, forward. And you got to hit it here, and then do the bottom, and same thing on the inside. So it's a process.
Yeah.
So me being lazy, I don't use the ball. I have the bigger wheel. It
Yeah.
covers more area
Yeah.
and less time.
Yeah, and you don't want to risk overheating a spot over another. So the round ball I can get by with that.
Well, you're doing it after the finish is on. I do
Oh,
it before.
yeah.
So I grind the hell out of it.
Ah, you,
I'm doing the entire thing on the Beal system with the walnut, and I don't put any finish on it,
yeah, okay.
other than that last step with the carnauba wax.
So it, just
But
about,
it's not gonna be anywhere near the gloss and
Right.
and smoothness that you've got.
so whatever finish you're using, you have to rub it out. I don't care if you're making furniture, if you're making bowls, if you're painting a car, you buff out the finish. So why would this be any different, right? You got to buff out the finish. And as soon as you pick up a piece, you'll know whether it was buffed out or not, as soon as you touch it.
Yeah.
So, and these don't have any finish on them at all.
Where do you leave sanding and start your finishing? What grit?
So I'm not as good as Turner as some of you make me out to be. So I start at 80 grit most times, not always, most times. Why do I start at 80? Because I don't want to waste my time and get to 120 only to find out I got to go back to 80. So if I can get rid of not defects, but the end grain, there'll be places where you've burnished the wood a little bit, you've crushed the fibers with your tool maybe. Those show up when you go to when you get to 180 or 220. Some of those marks show up, and now you got to go backwards again.
Yeah.
So
That's
if I,
real pain.
yeah, so most times, not always, most times I'll start at 80, but sometimes I'll start at 100 or 120, depends on the wood. So some woods finish easier than others. Depends on the density of the wood, what you're turning, right? So it depends a little bit on that. But typically, I will start out with 80 just to get it out of the way, and I'll get rid of all the defects with the 80 before I jump to the 100, 120, 180, 220, and I'll take it all the way up to 400.
Power sanding or hand sanding as well
I am
on the lathe?
I use a little bit of a combination because I'm trying to save the Velcro disc. I'm using a 2-inch disc, much like Don demonstrated, only I don't have the variegated ones. It's just a straight 2-inch. And some papers work better than others. You have to experiment a little. Some will last, some won't. Yeah, that takes a little bit of experimenting. When you're using water loss, because it's a film finish, one layer tops another layer, as opposed to like a shellac that'll burn into the previous layer. This won't do that. So if you miss a spot, it's hard to hide. If you get a sag, it's hard to hide. If you get a run, it's hard to hide. Because now you gotta sand through that layer into the previous layer to get rid of that mark. I find it's pretty hard to hide. So you got to have good lighting when you're putting it on so that you don't miss a spot. And you don't want to put it on so heavy that you get a sag or run. So the only times I get a sag is if my shop temperature drops to like 40, 45. Not good, because your finish is not going to set up quick enough and it'll have time to sag. So you want to be up around 60 degrees, 65 is pretty good. You get up to a higher temperature, then it dries a little too fast.
Do you
But
put it on your lathe and have it spin at all?
Never on the lathe. This is all hand finished. This is ready to put finish on. So there's no way, well, you could vacuum chuck it, but it's all handmade, hand done. So even though this is pretty contaminated air, I was going to put finish on a piece. But before I do that, I cut my finish. I put them in stop loss bags, and I cut them at 20% right out of the can. So I dump the can into a container, add 20% of mineral spirits or paint thinner. Mineral spirits probably better. And I cut it 20%. And so I work out of the bags. There's lots of ways you could try to prolong your water locks, and I've tried a number of them. Ron will contest. You can use canning jars and vacuum the lids on with canning jars.
Gone to stop loss bags.
And for a while I was using canning jars and pouring water in with the water locks. Water will not mix with the water locks. It'll sink to the bottom, and your water locks will be at the top, eliminating the air. So I would get it close to the top and put the lid back on. But the jars get messy, and it sort of kind of works, but it got too messy. The stop loss bags work a lot better. You can get the funnel that goes with it. They sell the rubber funnel, and you could hook up something on your a bench to hold it. Oh, there it is. So I clamp this in my workbench, and this fits right in that little groove there. So my bag is hanging there free. I put a little clamp here so it doesn't slide off, and I put my funnel in there and pour it in, and it's pretty quick. So a bag holder.
Tell me where the idea came from.
That's my bag holder. So I typically will work out of these applesauce containers. So I save all these applesauce containers to work out of, and I can reuse them. So Waterlocks Original. Gloss, so that's the sealer, semi-gloss. So they make a couple different sealers. This is the first time I see semi-gloss on a can that I bought. So, so I'll work out of the bag and just tip enough in there. I'm pinching the neck. Now I don't want to let a lot of air in, although I got some air in there right now. Pinching the top again, not to let too much air in there, a little bit of air. And I'll work out of the little container.
You find you get a little gel in the neck?
Yeah, and you can scrape that out with a little something. So I typically will work with, I've tried different, cloths, and I find that bed sheets work pretty good, as opposed to a t-shirt. T-shirts can have a little more lint. I think the t-shirts lose a lot more lint, as opposed to the sheet, where it's got a really tight woven fabric and there's less lint. So I work right out of these little containers, and I'll start with, it doesn't matter, the bottom. And with the first coat, I'll make sure that I get good coverage, especially on this end grain. Pretty easy to miss there. And I can see it's soaking in pretty good. And usually I'll do this at the end of the day. Sometimes I'll leave the shop, come back like 3 hours later. I know there's still dust in the air, but a lot of it's settled. I don't have a separate finishing room. So, and if I spill something, like a little container, which I've done before, I don't lose a whole can of finish. I'm working out of that small container. So, and I'm making sure that I get finish all the way around. Now this is the first coat, and it's the sealer. And you can see it like drying right behind me. And then I'll do the inside. Same thing. Making sure I get full coverage. Again, good lighting. If you have glasses, you might want to wear your glasses if you're doing the finish. You want to be able to have good lighting and see what you're doing.
You can pull the chain on the light that's right near you.
Oh, I'm fine here.
It's gonna have a dust storm.
Oh, I'll have a dust storm. So now I've covered this one completely. And I use these little V-groove sticks to dry on. I mean, I've tried other things that just didn't work. When I first started using these, I had a really sharp V. Actually left a mark on some of the bowls, which I don't like, obviously. And
Little blue triangles, but
the little blue,
they get elusive and pretty soon stuff's falling off.
I tried the blue triangles, and they come to a point. They actually left a mark on some of the bowls, and the those little points are just moving all over the place. So it didn't take long to figure out those didn't work. So I'll work on 2 bowls at a time. So I've got finished setting on that one. You know, by the time I'm done this one, how much time will go by? I don't know, 10 minutes? 10 minutes or so. So I want to get this first coat. I want to get good penetration. You know, that 20% diluted finish really helps to get it in there, get it to absorb.
So holding the bowl where you've already put finish on isn't a problem.
No, I of course always want to wear gloves. You know, I I took some, you know, many safety courses into work, and you know they had a guy talking about how solvents will absorb through your skin right into your bloodstream. So, you know, if you're washing your hands off with paint thinner, probably not a good idea. So
Gas is much better.
gas is much better. So again, I'm getting full coverage, and I'm going to set that one down. Now about 10 minutes has gone by, and I'm going to pick up my first one. And there are spots that are shiny, so I'm looking for that shine, right? Or the dullness. If it's dull, I know it needs more finish. So, and I'll pick up where I left off. Now, I won't be quite as generous on the second coat, but I'm going to coat it again to pick up any spots that are less absorbent. So I want to go through and get it all the way around. And I'm looking, the light's hitting it at an angle that it's reflecting back to me. So as I'm putting the finish on, I'm turning it so that I can see the reflection.
Now, are you considering that as one of your coats? Is that your second coat?
This is still one coat, but I'm coating it twice to get the one coat sufficient. And yeah, I don't want to be a lot of fingerprints.
So these are sealer coats.
This is my first sealer coat.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing my second go on the sealer coat. And I want to make sure that I get full coverage. Am I wiping it clean? Am I wiping it dry? No. I'm still using the same rag and trying to get it all the way around.
Now, when I do mine, I don't cut my waterlocks. I put it on, because he was just making a comment that it goes on a lot easier because yours is cut.
Yeah, I mean, I'm putting thin layers on. So the subsequent layers, again, I'm wiping it on. I'm making sure that when on my second layer, I'm going to go around this foot. And in so doing, I'm going to leave a little on the edge. So I'm going to go around and get that, then I'm going to come back and clean that edge up to make sure I don't have a buildup on the edge. And then I'm going to continue on. And I'm starting to run out of finish here, and I can see some spots are really dry, but some others are not so dry. And I'm spinning the bowl as I'm doing it so I can see the reflection of where I left off. If there's a spot that I've missed, it'll stand out. So again, back here, all the way around. And you look how dry that looks. I mean, it doesn't look like I got anything on. Almost looks like I don't have anything on there. There's a couple of shiny spots.
Thirsty wood.
A little shiny spot there that's on the face grain. And
This stuff does penetrate to an extent anyway.
it does what?
It does penetrate to an extent.
Yeah. Oh yeah, these, because I've cut it back some.
You're not putting any kind of an oil or anything on before you start to finish it, is that right?
No, this is straight waterlocks all the way.
And you're cutting both the finish and the seal.
Yes, 20% both.
So if you used a wet sand with an oil like Ron does to do that, would this finish be problematic?
Yes. I say yes. I said that maybe a little too quickly, but I would experiment doing that because you're putting a finish on wax.
Yeah.
So did I get that one to stick somehow, yeah, but I wouldn't recommend that on a normal practice.
Use the walnut oil to darken it slightly and to pop the grain and let it cure before you put the water locks on.
Maybe, I've never done it,
Okay.
but yeah, you know, it's one of those things that you might get it to stick and you might not.
So one thing with putting a Lux or a varnish or something over an oiled finish, the finish is going to adhere to a surface. So if you have an extremely polished surface, then the oil stuff will definitely positively give you an issue.
Yeah, yeah,
If it's got a little texture to the wood, then it will absolutely positively adhere.
yeah. There's no texture to these. These are polished pretty clean. So I sand to, like I said, 400. Sometimes I will, I'll go through with the 600 by hand off the lathe to make sure I don't have any sanding swirl marks. So if you do get a run or sag or miss spot, you want to make sure you clean that up with the least amount of abrasive as you can. So I might start with some 600. If it doesn't quite go away, I might go to, I hate to go back to 400, but I might. I'll try the steel wool first. Sometimes I'll have to go back to 400. But if you're going to use 400, be careful for the edges of your sandpaper. That'll create a scratch that you won't be able to get out. So make sure that you palm the paper correctly so you don't have edges of your sandpaper creating a scratch and you don't see it until you go put the finish on. So try to avoid going back to anything greater than that.
When you do that, is that just a spot cleanup or?
Just spot clean up, and then I'll go through the whole thing with steel wool.
So when you're saying you're hitting that with 400 grit paper, you're talking about just straight paper, sandpaper, not like a Cyasoft, which is a foam back?
Yeah, no, I'm using straight paper. You know, I like the green stuff right here, so that's 400. But I'll curl it up so that I don't have an edge that's gonna be hitting the edge of the bowl and cause a problem. That's 600, and then so you just gotta clean up best you can. But when you have a run, they're hard to clean up.
You ever try taking your paper and going to like a 90-degree corner on a weighted bed and just take your paper and roll it over so you don't have crisp paper?
Yeah, some there are some papers I really hate because as soon as you fold them in half, you get that crisp edge. Yeah, try to stay away from that paper. You know, this doesn't do that. The cloth back ones won't break an edge like the paper ones that you're talking about. That's problematic.
Now you'll let these set for 24 hours before you put anything on them?
Yeah, the next day, depending on your shop temperature, you know, if I'm up to 60, 65 degrees, the next day I'll steel wool them lightly. Sometimes I'll go right to the second coat without steel wool because this absorbs so much. There's almost no finish on the surface.
You're still on a sealer level coat.
Yeah. So that'll take very little sanding to go to the next coat.
Since I met Claude, I've been sold on water locks. I asked him how he did it. He told me, puts it on, wipes it off. I don't do mine the way Claude does. I'll take that finish he just did. I'll soak that bowl. I'll do the tube. Then I'll put that rag down, clean up my mess that I have. Then I'll take a dry rag and I will take it and completely wipe off that finish I just put on.
I've never taken a dry rag back to it.
And I've done that. That way I can even off my coat. And it takes me more coats to get the depth of finish that you have.
You're not cut though. You're not cutting. You're
No, I'm
cutting.
not cutting. No.
So if you're letting it dry too far, you're gonna pull a lot of fiber off your cloth on the second. When you're trying to wipe it clean, you're apt to have more fiber, no cloth fiber on your finish and problematic to sand out. You're gonna have some lint that's gonna come off your cloth because it's sticky. It starts to get sticky pretty fast. So if you're doing it quick enough,
On wood, I haven't had that issue.
so if you're doing it fast enough, maybe you're okay.
So that's it there. You won't look at it again to see if there's any missed spots or
Till tomorrow.
Well, I did as I went around. As I went around, I did that.
Right.
And then before before I put the next coat on, I am going to examine it to make sure that I don't have any runs, sags, or missed spots. It's really easy on the next coat to miss a spot because now it's all shiny. It's shiny, even the spots you haven't put anything on yet. So to catch the difference in sheen is you need really good lighting.
Can you
Or
find that your fingerprints from your don't interfere?
No, and the gloves. So what I try to do is I'll get the bottom first, and I'll set it. I did set it on the table here, but typically I will set it on my sticks. So I'll do the bottom, set it on my stick, and I'll wipe the spot that I'm touching on the bottom, and then I'll kind of hold it down and do the inside, and then wipe the middle. So and then I'll wipe this edge to make sure I'm good, so I don't have any fingerprints left. Sometimes I'll have finish on the bottom already that I got to go back and hit a spot. So I'll go back there and then wipe that again to get that little fingerprint, if you will, out. Well, on the first coat, you can see these don't look like they got anything on them. They look pretty much the way they were when I brought them in here. Yeah. So that's water locks. Again, I don't use anything other than water locks. And I don't make bowls that are, I have made them, that you're going to eat out of and cut on. And I have used walnut oil on some of those. So
that was all the sealer.
But typically not a league juried item. I won't put oil on it. They consider it not a durable finish, and I've gotten called on it a couple times. Early on, I was using mineral oil. Get those out of here. So then I said, "Oh, I'm going to use the walnut oil because this water locks is a lot of work. So I'm going to go to the walnut oil because I can put a coat or two of that on and call it good without even buffing them out." What's on that bowl? Well, that's walnut oil. Out of here. Oh, get those out of here. It's not not considered a durable finish because you got to recoat it.
So what would you do with an individual salad bowl? If like you're making a set?
If I'm selling it to a customer, I'm gonna put walnut oil on it. But if I'm gonna have it in a jewelry show, I'm not. Most of these are just to serve out of or to be decorative. If I do sign my work, I use a rollerball pen that's archival compliant, and it's easier than trying to wood burn. What I like about that is I can sign it. I could sign it right now and coat it with water locks. It doesn't run. So I really like that about it. And I've had some smaller bowls that I use to eat out of at home that have oil finish on them that I sign the same way, that I've washed many times, and its signature's still there. It doesn't wash off. So will this ever wash off? You'd have to wear the finish off to get that off.
Sharpies will wash off.
Sharpie's a problem. And
When I buff after it's been signed, I was just buffing it right back off again. So that's why I use the wood burner, but it's not nearly as neat.
Right, you're not near as neat. And the Sharpie will run. I've tried the Sharpies, and you put finish on a Sharpie, and makes a mess.
What is the archival pen that you use?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Go on Amazon.
Yeah.
They'll call it
In
archival.
fact, Sharpie makes the archival ones.
Oh, do they?
Different ink,
Yeah.
and usually a much finer tip.
Yeah,
And it doesn't run with the solvents or?
I could put it on 10 minutes later and cover it with water locks. It doesn't run.
You don't expect this.
So I believe it lasts a long time. Somebody will tell you it doesn't, but I think it does. I've got a bowl that I use all the time to prove it does last, even with just oil on it.
The archival pens will stand up to UV lights and stuff.
Yeah.
It won't.
I used to actually sign my name, but now I just initial it. So I have my little mark, and I also have a little, two little cut lines on there. That's also my mark. So should this ever go away, I could pick up one of my bowls 10 years from now and say, oh yeah, that looks like my mark. And these little lines are really scratches. I call them scratches because I try and keep them as shallow as I can. Because again, this scratch is deep enough that it's never going to go away probably. And if you make them too deep, it collects finish and a little bit of dirt in there. You can't clean it out. So I want to make it as shallow as I can because I can still wool this and it'll stay pretty clean. But if you make them too deep, it's crap builds up in there and it's hard to clean up.
Yeah, for amateur like me, I can use the guitar string, burn a ring around the outside of the bowl,
Yeah, yeah.
and I can give a crap what's when I get in it because I'm not in the league with you.
Well, you know, a little burnt ring is a lot. It's a nice smooth burn ring. It's the I'm making a little V groove is what I'm making. That's hard to clean up. Yeah.
Do you ever? I got in this habit in flat wood stuff that when I was done sanding, I'd just go over the whole piece with mineral spirits. I was trying to get kind of a preview of where I goofed up.
Yeah, yeah. I've never tried that, but yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I've never tried on bowls, but
I've made it a habit on bowls, and almost every time I was like, "There's a goof up."
yeah.
Bruce Troll taught me that trick. I've tried it, and I can't find my mistakes. I find it after I put finish on it. Even
Yeah.
if I've done those stairs.
Yeah,
Well, the other thing is, this comes from flat work too, is the angle, what he's doing with the light. If you get a really shallow angle,
Yeah.
that's when you see the scratch pop up.
it's all about
Tabletops or something.
Yeah, so like glance
You've got
at
like a
light
neck light like this
it's all about the lighting.
coming at it at a really shallow angle, and you look from the other side.
How many coats of sealer and how many coats of the,
I do this one coat I just did with the sealer. That's it. Then I go to the gloss with three coats. 3 coats with the gloss. So a double coat of the sealer, and then 3 coats of the gloss. Usually you get perfect. Well, I wouldn't say perfect buildup, but plenty of buildup. Some might say too much. I don't know. I kind of like the way they look with just the 1 coat of sealer. People that don't like the gloss, that would probably suit their fancy just the way they are. But I don't know how well sealed that would be just 1 coat.
do you wait longer before you go to the gloss? Do you have to
No.
wait longer or just
No.
sand, put it
No,
right on
at 60 degrees, no, overnight, yeah. Overnight you'll be fine.
Are you able to refill the stop loss bags?
They tend to get a little bit messy towards the end, so have I ever done it? I'm not sure if I've ever done it.
But you kind of treat them as a one use.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I've had the stop loss bag that I've had finishing for almost 2 years before I.
With the same filling.
Yep.
I got one running low. I'm trying to decide, do I chuck it and fill the next one?
So when
Guess I'm getting the answer.
when I fill these bags, because I cut it 20%, now I've got 20% more material. It didn't all fit in the bag. So I had, maybe this much left in the can. It lasted a week and it gelled up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it goes fast.
A week, and it went bad in a week. Oh, and this has been in the bag since what? Last fall, September.
Well, I'd been leaving it in the can for a while, and I'd turn the can upside down so that the liquid stayed down near the neck.
Yeah, but
And I
you still got air though.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
still got air up top. So
But after messing with that for 3 or 4 months, and then I poured the remainder into a stop loss bag, and that's lasted a good long time.
oh yeah,
So
As a
in the
product-
future, I would not do that. I would start with the stop loss bags,
right.
cut it, fill a couple, and
There's a product you can buy called oxygen.
yeah.
Once you can open your can, you can spray that in, you put the cover back on it, supposedly it keeps the air out. But
Supposedly.
Suppose a can of water locks now, a quart is what, 38, 39, $40.
on Amazon,
So this is my refilling thing. I turn the funnel inside out, wipe it down real good and
Yep.
whatnot. But
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing, only putting it in a vise and holding it up, but somewhat similar. What?
So I have a couple of bowls that I put water locks on.
Yeah.
And I thought I had wiped them, after I put it on, but when they dried, there was some water locks that had pool,
Hmm.
in the bottom of the bowl, and you could see that. What do I do? Can I sand that off, or does it need
Put it-
chemical treatment?
A chemical treatment, no. Sanding it off would be pretty difficult without over sanding the area around it. That's the thing about sanding a drip or a sag. You're going to over sand around the defect, which is hard to hide. So that's
It gets worse.
the problem with this type of finish, is hard to cover up a mistake, on especially that.
that's happened to me once or twice, and I just
tried to deal with it, and I just gave up, let it sit for 2 weeks, let it get really hard, and then sand it back to the wood and start over again.
Start over.
Same thing that
That's your best bet.
That's when I started putting the water locks on, and then after I've got it on, and I've cleaned up my wet gloves, I'll take a rag that I hold the bowl in, and a clean rag, and wipe it all down again.
Yeah.
That way I don't have runs.
Yeah. Yeah, I rarely get them. Have gotten a couple when the, temperature is really cold outside, and I have trouble maintaining temperature on the inside. Not a good idea at 50 degrees. You want to be a little warmer. That's my story. And then I'll let them set, like I said, 2 weeks before I buff them or buff them with anything.